So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can proxy model out this cannon that you see here. And we're going to be taking a look at a few different tools. We're going to be looking at how we can create a primitive cylinder and combine that with a primitive sphere, how we're going to be able to insert edge loops to add geometry through here. We're going to be doing extrusions. We're going to take a look at how we can do an extrusion and take all of our points and merge them down into a single point. We're going to look at how we can actually set up one half of the model and have the other half update as an instance. So you can see here, if I select these verts here, whatever I do on this side actually happens on the other side as well. So we'll be taking a look at those tools. There's a few other tools that we'll be looking at as well. We'll be looking at the Create Polygon tool, which lets you just lay down points and create a new piece of geometry. And we'll be looking at how we can take that and extrude that, and also how we can bevel edges. So you can see this was a nice straight edge right in through here, and then we put a bevel on it to get this angle that you see. So before we get started, let's make sure we've got our modeling templates. We did a side modeling template, and if you look at the earlier videos, we went over how we can actually set up those modeling templates. And the only thing that's new, if I hit the space bar on here, we can go to the top view. And if I hit 4 to view wireframe, you can see that we've got, for this top view, we added an image plane in through here, and we've got a top image. Let's hop over to Photoshop real quick and just take a look at the image planes that were created. So again, remember, we want to make sure that our image planes are nice and centered up and that they're symmetrical on both the left and the right. So if you go to this top view one, if I hit Control R, that'll bring up my rulers, and I can drag out a ruler and it should snap. This should snap right to the center of this document. The other thing you can see from this image here is that I took this image and rotated it down. So that's pretty easy to do inside of Photoshop. You can go to image rotation, and you can rotate it 90 degrees clockwise or 90 degrees counterclockwise, and you can see how it's going to rotate the image around. In the channels, we've got an alpha channel to knock out the back. That's important. Go ahead and make sure you're knocking out any of these pixels here with this alpha channel that you got. And the earlier video that I showed shows that process. So here's the side view, and when it goes into Maya, you don't actually see any of this part of the image because we're knocking that out with the alpha. So here's the channel for that. And you can see all this together, the alpha with the pixels at the same time inside of Photoshop. If you turn on the eye icon for all this, all at the same time, you can see those. So make sure that those image planes are nice and square. Make sure that they're symmetrical and that you have an alpha channel for that. And then whenever you go into Maya, you're going to go ahead and load those up. If you've already got a side image plane, you can always select it. I've got my image planes in a group. We looked at how to do that. If you hit Control A to bring up the attribute editor, this is where the actual image goes for this. So if you had a previous project that you were working with and you already had image planes set up, you can just switch out the image using this little folder icon right here. And again, a top image plane was created, so we can look at the side and create things from the side like this, and then also from the top. So that's going to give us enough information to actually start building this geometry with. So let's get into the different tools, and we'll walk together and we'll actually create this cannon together. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is, inside of Maya, we're going to open up the outliner. So we're going to go to Window, Outliner, and open that up just to make sure you can see everything that's in the scene that you're going to be working with. So I've got in a group all my geometry that I've been using and kind of storing, and this is the group that I've got for the cannon. We looked in the earlier video how to hit Control H, and that will hide your objects. If you select it and hit Shift H, that'll show. So I just want to get this out of the way. That's our end goal for what we're going to create. The first thing that I'm going to make is a primitive cylinder. So I'm going to go to Create Polygon Primitives. I'm going to go to Cylinder. I don't have this interactive creation turned on. And we can go to the option box for this and take a look at some of the creation for this thing. So I'm going to just give it a radius of 1, height of 4, this axis division 16, and the axis, we'll put this at Z because we want this thing running down. Let's move this this right here. You can see this little Z right here. That means it's going to be running down this axis right here. If we put on X, it would be running down here, and if we put it on Y, the cylinder would create up this way. So let's go ahead and hit apply like that, and there's our cylinder that we've got. So again, in the earlier videos we looked at, we can always go to one of these primitives, click over here in the channel box in the input section, and we can interactively click on here and middle mouse drag left and right, and we can change the values that we have here. So 16, I know 16 is a good number for giving us a nice amount of roundness. We are just working with Proxy right now, so that it is a little bit chunky as far as the polygons, but that's not a big deal just because we're working with this Proxy stuff right now. So we can take this cylinder. I'm going to go to the side view, so remember, just tap your space bar and that'll give you the quad view. So we can come over here to the side view that we've got our image plane set up, tap the space bar, and we're going to go into the side view. Now let's put tap W, and that's the hotkey for the move tool. And I'm going to go ahead and push this thing up, and now I'm going to use the scale tool. So the hotkey for that is R. We'll tap R, and we'll just scale this thing up and get it roughly to the right size right here by clicking this center manipulator here and dragging out. So now I'll just keep my finger on W, E, R, and I'll put it on Q. That way I can kind of really quickly go between moving this thing and then scaling it. And I need to scale it down just a little bit, move it here. We don't have to be like super picky about, you know, how precise we are. But I am going to try to get this thing roughly in the center here, and I'm going to put it back on the scale tool. This time I'm going to use just this manipulator, and then that way I can kind of move it forward, scale it, and I'm trying to get this thing as close as I can to the edge here, and then still imagine that the edge of this thing is going to, if this was a sphere, that it's kind of chopped off right in the middle of that sphere. So I think somewhere around here will be good. And again, you could always use the channel box over here to make your numbers exactly what you want it to be. So for the scale of this thing, I can see a nice even number over here might be 12.28. So I can select this top one, hold down Shift, select here, and now type in 12.28 like that. And I've got a nice even number to kind of work with. That'll help us out whenever we go to create the sphere and making sure the sphere is the same scale as the cylinder whenever we match these two things up like that. Okay, I'm going to tap the space bar and go to this view here. I know I don't need the back of this thing because we're going to join this together with the sphere. So let's go ahead and select the object, and I want to use faces. So we could tap F11, that's the hotkey for it, or we can right click on here and say face like that. And we'll just select this back face and hit backspace or delete, and that will get rid of that portion for us. Okay, so now we're going to do an extrusion. We're going to make the inner hollow part of this cannon piece here. So we'll select this face because we're already in the face selection mode. And this time we're going to extrude. So there's different ways to get to an extrusion. You can hold down Shift and right click, and you can see you'll get a whole different menu depending on if you're in object mode or component mode. Like we're in component mode with the faces. So you see if you click, I'm holding this whole thing down and not letting go. If you drag down, you can see there's an extrude face. So we can extrude here, and this is going to give us some different controls here. So you can just click and drag on these words thickness, and that'll give us a thickness for it, or we can click and drag and do an offset. So I'm going to give it a offset right about there, and divisions will give you divisions in there for your geometry. So that works for me. I'm going to be good here. So I'm just going to click off. We'll select a face again, and this time we'll go and hunt through the menus up here and find where the extrusion is on it this time. So I believe it's under Edit Mesh, and if we come down and say Extrude, and the reason I say I believe is because they've done a lot of rearranging of the tools to make it a little bit easier. So if you've used mine in the past, this might be a little confusing as to where things sit. So I'm still in the process of learning where everything sits in here. So we can do extrusion again, like that. So let's try that one more time. Just hit extrude. And Maya does not appear to be playing nicely for some reason. So there are bugs in every program, and I have noticed for whatever reason the extrude function within Maya has been a bit flaky. So let's take a look here. If we're in the shelf polygons, let's see if we can use the extrude button here, and it works there. So you got multiple areas where you can kind of get to some of these different tools. So I wish this thing was bug free, but it's just not the case. So the other thing that we can do is if you want to repeat the last command, you hit G, and then now that should just give me a new extrusion there. I know it didn't look like anything happened just because the extrusion is happening exactly where it sat before. But yeah, if you just hit G, that's going to give you a new extrusion there, like that. Okay, so let's talk now about how we can take all these points that you see here and then collapse them down to the center, a center point. And why we need to do that is because this is a what they consider an n-gon. It's a polygon with more than 4 sides, and game engines have problems with that. Usually they'll take this thing and actually do what's called triangulation. So when it goes into a game engine, it takes all these quads, any pieces of geometry, and turns it all into triangles. And a triangle is the most simplest form of a polygon that a game engine is going to understand, and it's going to be more efficient for it. So if we take a look at, again, I'm going to have to kind of dig through this just a little bit to find out where the triangulate is. It's under Mesh, and then we go to Triangulate. You can see that the game engine might do this for us. This is not what I want. I want a nice clean point right in the center where all the geometry kind of flows into that. So we need to control that. So basically I'm going to take this face, and it's possible for us to convert one selection type into another. So I know that I need to have verts to use this tool to snap all these verts down to the center and weld them all to one point. So to convert this to a different selection type, we've looked at the hotkeys for F9 is verts, F10 is edges, and F11 is faces. Okay, so that's the way that you normally switch between these different selection types, but to convert it to a different selection type, you add the modifier control. So we're in faces and we want to convert these to verts, so we hold down control and then hit F9, and you can see it's converted all that for us. So again, I'll hit F11, I'll select my faces that I want to convert, and I'll hold down control and hit F9, and that converts that to verts. Now we can, scale this thing down and do whatever we want. Another thing is I actually want to take all these points and then pull them down into a single point as well. So to grow a selection out, you hold down Shift and hit the right arrow key that is basically the period key. You see there's a comma key and the period key, and they're to the right of the M key. If you hold down Shift and hit that right arrow key, it'll grow the selection out. If you want to shrink a selection, you can hold down Shift and click the left arrow key, which is the comma key, and that'll shrink it down. So just with those tools, you can see how you can kind of convert one selection type to another, and you can kind of grow that selection out or shrink it. Shrinking never seems to work all that great for me, so I usually only use it to kind of grow out a selection. Okay, so now we have our selection made, and now we're going to collapse this down into a single point. So if I hold down Shift and right click, we get this menu here. We can say Merge Vertices, and I'm just going to click and drag up to merge vertices to center. So again, if we want to get back, you can see we got this like rubber band thing, and I go back to this single point here and go back to that other point. It's kind of like we're navigating through a hierarchy of menus. So here's my rubber band. I'm going to go up to merge vertices and then say merge vertices to center. And we've quickly just taken those points and merged them down to the center. The next thing we're going to look at is using the Bevel tool on here. So I know with the Bevel tool, I need to have edges to use that tool. So remember, the hotkey for that is F10, or we could right click on here and say edge. So they've got this cool functionality inside of Maya. If you see, this is considered an edge loop. So this is a loop of different edges that go around, and it's continuous, so we can just double click on it and it'll select that entire loop for us, which is nice and handy. So if we're going to do a bevel, hold down Shift, right click, and that's going to give us that menu, and you should get very familiar with this one. We're going to go to bevel edge. We could do a option box for this if we want to set up some options for it. So let's do that, and we'll do the width on this. You can see, let me just go ahead and say reset settings. So these are the default settings that they have, and that might be a little bit too high, so I'm going to do width 0.25 and hit apply. Yeah, so that was really large. So let's do 0.1, hit apply, and you can see this width is giving how much of a angle are we using for that bevel. So 0.08, let's try something like that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We're going to check this against our modeling template that we have. So remember, we've got this different history on the model, and we can always get to it if we go to object mode. I'm going to hit F8, or we can right click on here and say object mode. There's different ways of getting to that. If we select the model over here in the channel box, you can see here's all of our different inputs that we've got, and here's that last command that we did, which is the poly bevel, and here is this offset that we set, that angle. So let's go to the side view, and if you tap 4, you should be in wireframe mode. If you tap 5, shaded. So we're looking at it with 4 here. You can see what has been drawn by the concept artist is an angle that's a bit higher. So we can just click this offset and we can middle mouse drag left and right. So sorry, actually we need to do this fraction over here in the channel box. So you can see those numbers jump pretty quickly. So if we have that thing selected, middle mouse drag left and right, we get some big changes. If we select it and add the control modifier and middle mouse drag, those values go a lot slower for us. So we'll get to something right there like that, and we can put this at a number that makes it easy for us to get back to. So we'll set it at 0.2 like that. And I'm going to hit spacebar and get back, and now you can see this is what our model is starting to look like now. So this is a good time to kind of talk about soft and hard edges. So whenever we're doing these functions and making this new geometry, you can see that some of it's actually making hard, crisp edges. Now you might want to keep that in certain cases, but in my case I want to have a nice soft shading kind of fall off on this. So if you remember, if we select F10 to get our edges, we can double click on that, and then we're going to go to the Polygon menu subset, and we're going to go to normals, and then this time instead of having hard edges, we're going to tell it to have soft edges like that. And you can see, I'm going to hit F8, go out of here. Now you can see how that shades quite a bit different for us. Okay. The other thing that I want you to do is, we've got this history on here, and once we get to a certain point and we know everything's working the way that we want to get rid of history. So we're going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, and I would highly encourage you to learn the hotkey for that, just because you're going to use it so much. So that's Alt-Shift-D will delete history. Maya does have problems at times if you get this history stack and it's too large. Sometimes your geometry can fail on you, so just be in the habit of using the history, you know, when it makes sense, but then after you get to a certain point and you know that you're satisfied with your model, just delete the history and flatten everything and make sure that you're not going to run into any kind of problems later on for that. Okay, so remember we deleted this backside off. Now we can actually take a sphere and append it to that thing. So we're going to go ahead and make another primitive. So we're going to go to Create Polygon Primitives, and we're going to go to Sphere. Let's go to the option box for this. And radius, we'll just set this as a radius of 1, and the axis division 16 and 16, because remember we had a division of 16 for this cylinder. So let's try out those numbers and just see how they kind of line up. I'm going to hit apply, and here is the sphere that it's creating for us. It's kind of small, but we're going to fix that. So it is possible. I want these, what they consider the poles for these spheres, to run on the back side of this thing. We're actually going to delete this front half, and I like the way that it's creating this geometry and running everything down into this single point down here. Now if you remember, we gave this a scale of 12.28. So I can steal that value, and because I created the polysphere with a radius of 1, I should be able to select the sphere and give it a scale like this and plug in that value. So I'm going to just paste it in there and hit enter, and it should line up with the same scale as the cylinder. This is important because we're going to join these two things together. I'm going to put on the move tool, and if I show wireframe on shaded on this thing, so let me find this little icon here. I'll click that, and you can see it'll show us our geometry over the top of the shaded thing. And that comes in handy when you want to snap things and things like that. So I'm going to move this thing up just like this, and if I hold down V, it turns on temporarily vert snap. So if we move up in just this one axis, I can snap to this vert right here, which gives us our center point that we need. And then I can hold down V and click and drag to the end down here like that. So if I take this thing, we're pretty good now. This is quite a bit of geometry through here. So remember, we have these divisions, and we got a subdivision axis for here, and we could put this down to 8, and that's not the one that I wanted. So I usually have to do trial and error and just try this out. So I want to leave this one to 16 because that lines up with all this geo here. And I can take this one and drop that one down to 8, and you can see it's reducing that geo by half. So it doesn't have to be 8, it could be 12, depending on how much resolution you went through here. But again, since we're just making a proxy model, we don't have to be super crazy with the resolution on here. So I'm just going to drop that down to 8. We've got that there. And then now I'm going to go and tap 4 to go into wireframe mode because I want to see through that cylinder, because I'm going to select half this sphere. So I'm just going to select all the faces, and then I'm going to select F11, and that'll give me my face selection mode, or we can right click on here, say face, and then now I'm just going to drag a marquee through the center of my object. So with my camera, I'm trying to get it to where it's, you know, roughly I can see like right down that center part. Let's drag a marquee right here like that, and then I'll select all those faces, and I just hit backspace, and then they're gone. So I can tap 5 to go back into my shaded mode, and hit F8 to go into object mode, or we can right click on there and say object mode. And I want to turn off that wireframe on shading. That just helped me out in that case, and you should get used to turning that thing on and off, because that, you know, there will be different cases why you want it on and why you don't. And again, we looked at how we can, you know, change the smoothing angle of these polys. So that doesn't look good, right? So we'll select it, Polygon menu subset, normals, and we'll soften the edge for that. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere, and we're getting that shape starting to look pretty good. Next thing we're going to do, let's make this extrusion that you see here. So to do that, we're going to introduce a new tool, and we're going to show how we can insert edge loops on here. So if I select by F10, if I select an edge, and if I hold down Control and right click, this is a new menu. So remember, we were looking at Shift right click before. That's one menu set. Control right click gives us a whole new menu to work with. And we're going to use this to edge ring utilities and go here and say to edge ring and split. And it'll give us a split right down the center of our model, which it's pretty cool. And if we click another edge and just hit G for sorry, I was going to do last command, but I did something else past that. So I'll just do Control right click to edge ring and split. And you can see if I click this edge and hit G, I can do my last command. So we can really quickly divide this model up pretty easily. So if I select an edge, if I want to get rid of one of those loops, I can hold down Control right click, and then this time we'll go to the edge loop utilities. We can say to edge loop and delete, and we can get rid of that. I can select that edge and hit G for last command, G for last command here. So I'm just going to flatten the geo, which deleting the history. Remember, you have to be in object mode. So you hit F8, and that can swap you back and forth between that, or you can right click on here and say object mode. And remember, the hotkey for deleting history is Alt-Shift-D, like that. Okay, so that tool doesn't seem exactly so helpful for us because we need edges here and here, but it is a quick way to get edges right down the center of this thing. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about this tool and show you how we can actually slide that edge along through the piece of geo. So I'm going to hit F10. We're going to select this edge. Remember, hold down Control and right click, and we'll say to edge ring utilities, to edge ring and split. So now we got this edge, and take a look over here in the channel box. We've got this poly split ring. We can actually select it, and there is this weight. So we can click on that, and remember any of these values, we can click on that and middle mouse drag left or right, and we can slide that thing around. So it slides pretty quickly, but if you hold down the control modifier while you're doing this, it makes the values go a lot slower. So to get an exact placement of that, we can go to the side view, and we're in wireframe mode, tap 4 for that. And we got this weight, hold down Control and middle mouse drag roughly at about there, right? So I'll select this edge and I'll hit G for my last command. Again, that's Control, edge ring, and split, if you're wanting to remember that. Now we've got two poly split ring. We'll go to this one. This is the new one. We'll click on the weight, middle mouse drag, holding on Control just to give some nice finesse on there, like that. And then now we've got this thing kind of sectioned off. Okay, so I'm going to tap the space bar and get back here. And now we're going to do an extrusion and give some thickness and give what looks like a little bit of a bevel, but we'll use some of the different tools for the extrusion stuff. So we need faces for the extrusion, so we'll hit F11, and then it'll put us in our face selection mode, and we'll just drag a marquee right down the center of these ring of faces that you see here. Okay, so again, Shift right click gives us this menu that's got the extrusion and some of these other things on here. So we'll do Extrude Face. This gives us this whole menu to play with. So we can do thickness. Let's do that. I'm going to go to the side view, and then we can check this out and make sure we're being a bit specific about what we're doing. And then the offset, we can play with the offset to give that bevel there, like that. Okay, so that was pretty easy. We'll tap F8 to go into object mode. And again, we've got some history built up on this thing. I don't want it anymore. I'm good. I like the model. We'll hold on Alt, Shift, and then D, and then we're deleting the history on that. Okay, so we've looked at quite a few different tools. I'm going to end the video right here, and then we'll pick it back up, and we'll start learning how to make the base and some of these other pieces on through here. Okay, that was a lot of information that was just thrown your way. So hopefully you've taken that in and kind of given yourself a little breather, a little rest, and now you're energized and ready to go for this next section. So in this part, we're going to start working on the base, and I'm going to introduce you to a new tool called the Create Polygon tool. And it's a great tool. I love it. It's kind of like drawing to me, but it's drawing with geometry. So if we go to Mesh Tools, you can see we've got this Create Polygon tool, and it works off of, depending on what your view is, it just creates everything off of the grid. So we know we've got this flat piece, this base, so let's go to the top view for our modeling template that we gave ourselves, and we can just basically lay down a point like this, and if we want to snap to the grid, you could hold down X while you create points, and it'll temporarily snap to the grid. And then we could just add point, 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 and then I want to snap to the grid on this one. I'll hold down X like that, and I can hold down X and snap to the grid here. And you can see we've got this dotted line. That means this is the next point that can be made. And if you add points that you don't want, you just tap backspace and it'll get rid of them. And when you're ready to say, I want this tool to be complete and I'm done, you just hit enter like that. And then now, that's made a new piece of geometry for us, and like I said, it's kind of more like you're drawing out this piece of geometry. If we hit F9 for our points, our verts, or we right click on here and say vertex, you can see that each one of those clicks that we made is actually making a vertice for us. So I'm going to go back to the top view, and I'm going to just pull this in just a little bit like this. And if you remember, we can snap this point to where the location of this one is as far as on this x-axis. If we just hold down V, temporarily turn on vert snap, and then just click and drag this axis and then you can see we could snap to this. If I put my cursor over this point, it snaps here like that. And I want to get this thing nice and even with the back of this, so I'll hold down V and then move this axis, and then see I can click on this point and we're kind of snapped up on this direction here like that. So let's go here to our 3/4 view, and we're actually just going to take this piece of geometry and we're going to do an extrusion on it. So we'll hit F11 for our faces, select that. Remember, shift right click gives us this menu that's got the Extrude Face on there, or we could hit this button up here, and we're going to give it a thickness. We're going to drag it this way. I'm going to look at the bottom of this, make sure it's creating a bottom for us, and we'll go to the side view and we'll take a look at this and make sure that this thickness is the same thickness of what we're looking at here. But actually what I'm going to do, I see there's like a little lip down there, so I'm going to leave the thickness here like that. I'm going to hit G for my last command for extrusion, and we're going to give it a new thickness here like this. So now you see we got this edge running down here and this one here, and then I can give it an offset and kind of pull these points in like this, and everything looks like it's working okay here. Now this offset that we did, so it's going to offset it along this entire face. We need this thing to be nice and flat through here because we're basically building 1/2 of the model, and we're going to instance this thing over. So I'm going to select these faces. I don't need them because we're building just 1/2 of this thing. And now if I hit F8 for my object mode for this, let's delete history on this. Let's tap W just to see where our pivot point is, and it's at the center of the world. So just to make sure, if you, let's just say if I hit insert and move the pivot point, and we wanted to get that thing back into the center, we can go to modify reset transformations, and we would want to make sure we froze our transformations to zero out any kind of values. We looked at that in an earlier video, and that way we can make sure our pivot point's right there at the center, because that's important whenever we mirror this thing over as an instance. So we're going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special, and go to the option box for this, and I'm just going to go Reset Settings. So this is the default settings for this. The geometry type I want it as an instance, because an instance lets me, whatever I do on this side, it's going to mirror it across on the other side for us, and that's the functionality that we want. And basically, if you look at the x-axis here, I want a negative copy of this, so I can give it a negative scale on x, because this is x, y, and z. If I give this a negative scale of 1 and hit apply, you can see now I have a copy of that, and it's going across the x-axis for us. And if I select this, select my points, F9 right here like that. Now I'll hold down shift and add to my selection here, and then I can move these things around. You see, now we're going to be able to snap to the grid, and I just want to turn that on temporarily. Hold on X and then snap right to the center here, and so we're good on that. A good rule of thumb is if your points ever get off center just ever so slightly like this, you can select the border of this thing here. Just if you go into edge mode, which is F10, and you double click on that, it's going to give you the entire border that you see that's running down the center. Now if you remember earlier in this video, we looked at how we convert one selection type to another, or in edges we want to convert those to verts. So we hold down Control and hit F9, and that converts our selection type for us. Now we can hold down X and then snap to the center, and everything's running right directly down the center of this thing. Alright, now that we have this base made, you can see that there's a metal plate that sits on top of here, and it connects kind of to whatever this shape is right here. So that's pretty easy. We're just going to take a polygon primitive, and we're going to create polygon primitive, and we're going to make a cube. We'll go to the option box for this and just say reset settings to where we've got a width, height, and depth of 1, and divisions 1, 1, 1 through height, depth, and width. And so that's basically going to give us a box. We'll take the box and move it up. Let's go to the side view so we can kind of move this here and then scale it. Same kind of process that we did earlier for the cylinder. So we're just going to kind of move this thing around and kind of scale it up this way and down to give the thickness. Keep scaling it out. Right here, kind of like that. And I'll move it. We've got something like this. So I want the bottom of this thing to go travel the entire distance of this. So I'm just going to move it forward. Hit undo just because I lost my selection. Scale it up just a little bit bigger and then scale it down this way like that. And I'll move it up just a little bit more. Now we're going to check it from the 3/4 view, and then we could also check it from the top view as well. So you can see in our image that was drawn by the concept artist that this thing is a bit longer in this dimension. So we'll just use this manipulator here to scale it out like that. And so now we've got this base here, and it looks like there's a slight bevel to the front of this thing. So that's pretty easy. We can just go to F9 from the side, select these verts here, tab W for move, and just move that thing back just a little bit like this. Now there is kind of like a little bit of a bevel, but because we're doing the proxy thing, we're not going to get to that kind of detail level with this. So we'll just go back out to our 3/4 view. And that looks pretty good. The only thing is when you see things drawn out on a modeling sheet, you guys have to, as modelers, make determinations of if things really are truly working in 3D or not. And to me, this lip looks a bit odd. It looks a bit weird. So I'm actually going to take this thing and scale it in kind of around to right here, like that. I'll make it stick out just a little bit further, and I think it would look nice if there was a nice bevel kind of coming to the top like this one at an angle. So I'm going to select this face and just scale it in this way just a little bit. So again, whoever's drawing this stuff out, they're drawing and they're trying to draw a three-dimensional drawing for you and give you things that are going to line up correctly, but until you start building things and actually putting them in 3D, there might be things that are kind of wrong with the drawing or things that aren't working. And now that we've made this thing here, I can actually see our operation that we did to get this kind of offset here really pulled in the back of this thing, and that's probably not what we want either. So I'm going to go to the side and then hit F9 and then take this and then just hold down V temporarily and then snap that to those points that we have here as well. So you can see we've got a nice flat back to this thing now. So again, just don't take it as you want to get as close as you can to the artist's vision of what this object's supposed to be about, but you as a modeler, you do have to use some of your knowledge and your expertise to know whenever it's time to kind of break away from whatever it is that they've drawn, because some things just don't work in 3D whenever you actually go to build them out. Okay, so there's the base for this thing, and let's continue on and let's go ahead and make this shape that we see here. So if we look from the top view, you can see it's kind of like this little bit of a shield kind of thing, and it moves back in this direction. And then from the side view, this is what we've got here. So to accomplish this shape, I'm going to use the Create Polygon tool again. So we're going to go to Mesh Tools, Create Polygon tool right here, like that. And then now I'm going to be able to just kind of draw a point, 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 point. I'll make another one here, maybe one here, like this. And then I'm going to draw these same points on the outer edge, like this. And you remember we got this last dotted line here. If I make one too many, you can hit backspace. And to finish out the tool, get that dotted line, just hit enter and it completes this out for us. So now we've got a flat piece of geometry. So I'm going to push it over this way, like that. You can see how I've pushed it over from the top view and I'm lining it up with this drawing that we've got here. And we'll use this as a starting point. Now I can hit F9 and select my points, and I can start dragging these points out. So I'm just holding down Control and Shift to continue to add to this selection that you see here, like this. And I'm going to pull it out just a little bit to start giving this shape. So let's check this against the top. And again, I think this is going to be one of those cases where we're going to be able to use the drawing as a guide for us, but it's not going to be 100% accurate just because somebody in their mind is drawing this thing two-dimensionally and trying to give the right shape, but they're not going to be able to draw perfect 3D. So that is looking fairly decent. So we looked at an earlier video to make this little cutout guy using the multi-cut tool. So we'll go to the object mode, I'll tap F8, and then I'll hold down Shift, right click, and you can see we've got this multi-cut tool. We'll put it on that. And that lets us kind of just click and drag up from an edge. I'm hitting that point we got here, and I want to make an edge going across. So I'm just going to tap Enter to complete that tool. I'll just drag up here, hit Enter. So again, I'm clicking and dragging on this edge till it snaps to that point, clicking and dragging along this edge till it snaps to that point, and hit Enter. So I'll hit Undo real quick just to show you this tool also works from, you can go from this point to point like that and hit Enter. So that's possible. I'm just used to a different tool that kind of worked in this way, where you drug along an edge and you hit a point like that, and you did the same thing over here. And you always knew that you were getting geometry that was going to be nice and clean. So I'm kind of following some of that workflow from the old way of using a tool. All right, we're going to keep pushing on this shape here just a little bit. So I'm going to make sure everything's nice and shored up on here. I'm going to hit F9, take these verts and make sure that they're snapped to the base of this thing. So again, if we hold down V and turn on temporary vert snapping, we can click just this axis and then click on a point here, and we know that these verts are snapped to the same plane as this base that we've got here. Okay, so I'm going to actually take these faces, F11, and we're going to do an extrusion to give this thickness. You see in the drawing we've got this thickness that we got going on here. So let's go ahead and hold down Shift and right click. And remember, that's going to give us this whole menu to work with. We'll drag out our little rubber band selection thing here to Extrude Face. And then now we'll just click and drag on the thickness right here. Let's go to the side view so we can kind of try to match that up with the drawing. Again, this is just a drawing. It's not going to be perfect, so we're just going to use that as a best kind of guess, the best way of trying to get this thing lined up like this. Okay, so that's going to give us our extrusion. You can see we've got this weird kind of angle going on now, so we looked at taking that, and we can select this edge here, and we can actually just snap that up to the base of this thing right here. So remember, hold down V, just click on this one axis, and now we're snapped up right there like that. The other thing we can do is kind of make sure all these points are coming out as far as we would like. So we can hold down V and snap to this point here, hold down V, snap to this point here, V, move it out in just this axis, holding down that, and we're snapping to that. Hold down V, and I'm just going to snap to that right there. So that's working fairly well. And I'll take this and hold down V and snap to this right here. Okay. So the other thing is, let's take a look here. These inner parts, if we go to the top, when we did this thickness, it kind of moved all these points in. So we can just drag a marquee along all these verts here and just hold down V and then snap along here like that. So this is giving us the shape that we got going on here like this. This is working fairly well. Let's turn this into an instance so we can get the other side going at the same time and see the changes. So again, before I get going, I'm going to delete the history. And this time, remember, we moved the object out, so we got some translation, and we want to get rid of that. We want to zero all that out. I talked about that a little bit earlier in the video, but now this is really going to come into play. So we're going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. I'm going to do the option box just to make sure we're doing translation, rotation, and scale. Hit apply like that. See how it just zeroed out all those values for us? It's exactly what we want. Now, if we're going to do a negative copy of this and mirror it across the x-axis, we need our pivot point to be right in the center. So there's different ways of getting to that. We could always hit Insert and then hold down X and then snap to the grid like that, and then hit Insert, and our pivot point is now set. The other thing we could do, it's going to move it over here like kind of where it was at before. If we know everything's frozen for our transformations like we just did, we can go to modify and we can say reset transformations, and it'll throw it in the center of the world here for our pivot point. And that's what we need. And tap 5 and then 6 is texture mode. So I'm going to just keep calling this stuff out, and you guys just need to get really familiar with these hotkeys and what they do and what they turn on, okay? So we're going to do this negative copy. So we've got this thing selected. It's an object mode. Remember, we can right click in there, say object mode, and we're going to go to edit, duplicate special, option box. And we've already set this up from the earlier part of the video. If you want the settings, you could actually go edit and say save settings, and it's going to load up this way every time. But you're going to find out as you use the program more, you're going to want to do a lot of different things with this. But I do use this quite a bit. So remember, geometry type is an instance. We've got a negative scale on 1 on the X. This is X, Y, Z. And now we've got our copy, right? And then we can select this thing, just test it out. Move that thing around, and everything we do on this side is going to update on the other side for us as well. Okay, so the other thing we're going to do is, you can see there's a flat piece of geometry in here that's like the inner part of this thing. In order to create that, we're going to use a tool to insert an edge loop. We already looked at how we could take this thing, hit F10, control right click and say edge ring utilities, edge ring and split, and then move that over. That's a possibility. The other possibility that we have is if we use there's an insert edge loop tool. So if you're in object mode, shift right click, and we're sorry about that, shift and right click, we're getting used to this menu that you see here, and we're in object mode. This time, instead of doing the multi-cut tool like we looked at earlier, we're going to use this insert edge loop tool. And this one's pretty cool. It just lets you click and drag along an edge, and you can insert an edge loop like this, right? So I really want a loop running right down the center of this thing. So I was hoping that this thing would kind of give me this right here. So that's a little bit better than what I'm looking at. And I guess it all kind of depends on where I start and click this thing out. If I click right here on this point and click and drag out, I can give myself something that's going to be like the thickness that I'm looking for. So if you look at the thickness of this, that's pretty darn thick. We don't necessarily need that to be that thick and through here. So we could go and drag that out right about here. The other thing is, again, here's one of those cases where I just don't think that this shape is working quite as well in 3D as what was drawn up by the concept artist. So I'm going to go to the top here, and I'm going to move this in just a little bit. Maybe give us a little bit more thickness like this, okay? So I'm using my artistic liberties to do that, and I think that looks pretty good. We just get enough, I just want enough space in between this thing, give enough breather room. And then now that's going to allow me to hit F8, hold down Shift, right click, and then do that Insert Edge Loop tool. And it's going to give me a little bit more breather room for this thickness on this thing. So I'll drag it out right about here. Okay. And remember, if you want to see wireframe unshaded, we could turn that on and kind of see what the construction of this thing is. Because if you don't have that on, you can't really see that it's actually creating that thing over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what we've just created, and we've got some faces along the bottom of this thing. I can select here, 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 and here. And now if we do an extrusion on this, that's going to give us the geometry that we're looking for to create this face here. So remember, we can always click here like that, or we can shift right click and say Extrude Face. And this time you can see with the manipulator, you can click and drag out, and you can do a piece of geometry like that. This is considered like the moving in object space. If we click this little icon right here, that's going to put us in moving in world space. So you see how the manipulator changed, and now we can just click and drag straight down, and we're moving in the world. So we can either move in what would be Z or Y or just X. So again, we can always click this little manipulator icon thing here to get back and forth between object and world. So that's going to take this and drag this straight down like that. I'm going to push it down far enough to where it's going to make it real easy for us to select these verts. So hit F9, we'll select our vertices like that. And now we can move this up. If we scale, we could kind of do this with this manipulator here for scale. But I'm going to want to take this, and remember, I'm going to snap this to this edge along here. So hold down V, just moving this axis, and we can just select these points here. And now we've got this thing nice and flat. And that was pretty easy for us to do. Okay, so I'm going to hit F8. We want to get rid of our history. So let's hit Alt-Shift-D to get rid of history. And we can look at any of our objects and see, do we have history on it? Yep. So let's get rid of that. And looks like we're good on this one. This one's got a little history. Let's hit it again. And we're deleting all the history on that. So we're good on that. The last part we need to make is this thing here. So that's pretty simple. It's just a cylinder that runs down the center of this cannon. Okay. So let's go create Polygon primitives, and we'll do our cylinder again. This time I'm going to tap 4. See how we had it running down the Z-axis for this? We will need to rotate that. So we're going to tap E, or you can click here. Here's a neat little hotkey for you. If you hold down J while you rotate, it snaps in increments of rotation of, let's see, what is this, like 15 degrees? No, 30 degrees, something like that. So I was just holding down J and it's going to snap that for me, or if I don't have it completely tidied up, I can just go over here to the channel box and do a 90-degree rotation. So I'm going to put it on the move tool. We're going to go to the side, move it up to the center of this thing, and then we'll scale it up and try to get this thing centered up as best as possible. Kind of like that. Right there like that. And we'll go to the top view, scale this thing out. And we're going to come here and look at it from the side. So based off of our drawings that we hear, what I'm imagining is, yeah, this thing sticks out roughly about here. And then we got another cylinder in here. So that's pretty easy for us to do. We could just go ahead and select this face. And we looked at extrusion. Hold down Shift, right click, Extrude Face. Do the offset on it. We can go to the side view and even match this up with the drawing. So let's go here like that. Okay. We got that. And now we can just hit G for last extrude, and we can extrude that thing out. And I'm imagining that thing would probably stick out about there. So I'm going to take this face here, delete it, select my verts, running down here, and move it, and just hold down X and snap it right down the center of this, like that. And we've got a copy. Well, let's make a copy. Let's make an instance of this thing. So we'll just go to Edit, Duplicate Special. We have already set it up, so everything should be working. No, it didn't, because I've got translation and scale and everything else. So let's go through those steps again. We'll just go Modify Freeze Transformations, Modify Reset Transformations, and then now we can go to Edit, Duplicate Special, and we've got that instance. So the other thing I want to do is I want to have a nice point down the center of this. So I'll select a face here, Shift right click, Extrude Face, and I'm obviously speeding up here because I just keep repeating a lot of the same things. We'll select this face, convert that face to verts. So remember, hold on Control, F9, and then we're going to merge these to the center. Shift right click, merge vertices, merge to center. Okay. And a lot of these things I'm doing with these shift right click and these menus, they all exist up here under, they're going to be under mesh, edit mesh, and mesh tools. You'll be able to find these different tools. It's a lot quicker, and you'll see this as time goes on. It's a lot quicker just to have that menu pop up right here and not have to actually travel up to here and do this stuff. So that's why I'm showing you guys this way of where the tools kind of sit and everything, because it will actually help and speed up your workflow whenever you're creating things. Okay. So the last part of this, let's go ahead and save the scene and make sure we're saving our work. You you definitely should be saving throughout your process. I would give my files a name like _001, and then the next one just make it 002, 3. Just make life easy as possible for yourself, and name these things. Again, you don't want to lose any more than about 15 minutes worth of work. So save about every 15 minutes, and if that's too much for you, then save at least every half an hour. Life won't be so horrible if you lose a half an hour's worth of work, but you'll find out real quickly when you do, you're not going to like it, and you'll be saving pretty often. Okay, so the last thing we're going to be taking a look at, there's actually two things. I'm going to do some automatic UVs for you, but we want to take all these different pieces and get them into one object. So just because I like to be organized, I'm going to select all the objects and hit Control G, and that's going to group. And that is under Edit, Group, like that. I'll give it a name, Canon 2, because this is the second one I built. GR for group. Not sure why that didn't take, so CANN. Maybe it's because I had 2 in there. No, I don't know. Didn't like something I hit, so I just renamed that. Oh, this is cool. This black shading of death. So this is some default option that was put into Maya as screwed up instance lighting, and so whenever that shows up, we're going to go to lighting, make sure this two-sided lighting is turned on like that. And I've had there's just some weird stuff going on with some of these things, so I'm gonna bring it back. If I hide it and then bring it back, I don't know, that's definitely a bug, and it's real annoying when stuff like that happens, because you as an artist, you're not doing anything wrong, it's just there's a bug that needs to be fixed. But check and make sure you got this two-sided lighting. That really threw me off, just because I think that was a default option before, and then they changed it, and so that's just this current iteration of Maya's needs to be checked for that. Hopefully they change that back. And then maybe you need to hide whatever that black shading is and then show it again, and maybe that'll come back. So we got our object. Now we're going to actually combine all these into one final object. So this can cause Maya to crash sometimes. I'm really nervous about that, so I'll save right before I do this operation, and then we'll go to Mesh, and then go to Combine, and that's going to combine everything together. This is one case where you definitely should delete history immediately, because you see all these empty groups and everything else, and there's these transform things that are really weird that you're not going to care about. But if you delete history, it should get rid of most of that. For whatever reason, Maya leaves some garbage behind. I can just select this whole group and hit delete, and it should get rid of everything. So now we've got this thing, and it's all just one object, and that's what we want to push into our game engine, right? The other thing that you need to know about this, when we combine these things together, just because we combine them doesn't mean that these vertices are all welded up, right? So I do know, if I've been really strict about snapping everything to the grid and these verts really do sit directly on top of each other, I can merge these things together really easily. I can just select the entire object, so hit F8, and remember how we can convert selection types? We can convert an entire object into vert selections just by being in object mode. Right click, say object mode, you see it's green, selected. Now we can hold down Control and hit F9, and that converts everything into vertices. So we've looked at the menu, Shift right click, and this is where Extrude was and everything else like that. Now we can go to Merge Vertices, go here, but now we're going to look at, instead of Merge Vertices to Center, we'll do Merge Vertices Option Box. Okay, we'll pull this open. I'm just going to look at, these are the defaults. I'll turn this always merge for 2 vertices, turning that thing off. And this threshold is looking at how close are the distance for these verts, right? So if they meet a certain threshold, if they're within a certain distance, it'll merge them together. So if I do 1, we'll hit apply, and you see how it merged some of these things together because they're so close together like this, and this threshold is pretty high. So if I put this at 5, See how it's starting to merge things together like that? We don't want that. If I put it down to 1, it's getting smaller for that threshold, what it's going to do. But in my case, I've selected all the vertices in the object, and I just want to merge vertices that are sitting directly on top of each other. So I'll type 0.0001 like that and hit apply. And then that way, that's such a small threshold that unless these verts are sitting like directly on top of each other, they won't merge together. Okay, so and to check that, we can check the verts, hit F9, we can select it, and you can move it around, and you can check it that way. That's one way of checking it. The other way of checking it, let's hide our image planes. So I'm just going to select that whole group that I got and hit Control G, or Control H, sorry. It's going to hide my image planes. There are some tools inside of Maya to help us know if this thing's been kind of welded together correctly. So we'll go to Display, Polygons, and then go to Custom Polygon Display right down here. And we'll open up this menu. So this thing looks nice and crazy for us, but don't get too worried. We're just going to look at this highlight border edges and hit apply. And you can see any open edge is going to draw with this nice thick outline. So if we tap 4 for wireframe, if we had a split going down the middle of this thing, it would draw nice and thick for us. And we could change this edge width to something like super crazy, like 6, and hit apply. And now you can see this thing's an open edge. And like I said, if you saw any problems where there was an open edge on here, you might just have it just in one little place. So you could just drag a marquee around these verts here and then shift right click and say merge vertices, and you can use that merge vertices to center and do it here and hit G and keep working your way around, and it might sew up just a little tiny area. So again, with this custom polygon display, that's really going to help you out. I'm going to put this back down to 3 and hit apply, and then close out of there, hit F8. And when I'm completely done, let's name this thing Canon Proxy, like that. And we'll turn off our wireframe unshaded. And again, we got some edges that are hard that you might want to take a look and fix any problems that you see with this. I just don't like this hard edge through here, so I'm going to hit F10. And it's possible that you can go and go under the polygon menu set and say normal soften edge. We can soften just one edge at a time, or you can double click on that ring and hit G for my last command, or go here, and it's going to soften that whole thing. And I'm going to delete history. Before I put anything into a game engine, I always delete history on this thing. The other thing is we're not really going to get too far into UVs right now, but we're going to look at this real quick, and it's going to be a big jumbled up mess, I can guarantee you. So we're going to go to Window, UV Texture Editor, and we'll load that thing up, and then we'll zoom out holding Alt, and then right click, and you can zoom in and out. And you got all this gunk for UVs. So that's not going to look good when we push it into the game engine. We don't want to spend a lot of time right now with the proxy stuff. So we can just go to create UVs, and we're just going to do automatic mapping option box. We'll do 6 planes, so it does a mapping from the top, like a cube basically, top, bottom, front, left, right, front and back. We'll hit project, and you can see it's going to lay out all of our UVs to where there's no overlapping against our parts. These aren't good UVs by any stretch of the imagination, but it is just something that'll give us some kind of start. And so I'll hit delete on that. And if we want to check that thing, we can go to UV Texture Editor. This is something new that they added to where you can actually display checkered tiles on here, so you can see how the texture might flow against this thing. So that's pretty nice. So we've got this here, like that. I'm going to take this and throw it into the geo area. Everything's working pretty good. Again, if I'm going to save out this scene for somebody else, I'll just select the object, tap F in all my views, and make sure everything's nice and clean. Save that scene file. And we'll make another video, and we'll take a look at how we can export this thing out as an FBX, and then we'll pull that into Unreal. Okay.